Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Chad O'Connor. I'm the editor of the Global Business Hub blog on Boston.com, as well as faculty at Northeastern University, where I teach organizational communication and culture. And we're here today thanks to ViewDo Labs and Brightstar for putting on this collaborative themed panel that you're about to hear today. I want to start off by doing a few thank yous and making sure that we have some house cleaning taken care of first. So first, special thanks to ViewDo for being our host. They're a pioneer in enterprise social network analytics and governance. Their tech helps organizations fuel innovation, better leverage business data and intellectual property, and realize value from their next generation social enterprise investments. Also thanks to web sponsor and elite partner of ViewDo, Brightstar. Brightstar builds award-winning digital solutions for enterprises on Microsoft technologies, including SharePoint, Office 365, Yammer, and Azure. And we encourage all of the viewers to tweet in questions throughout this broadcast to the hashtag VDLPanel13. We'll try to incorporate as many tweets as possible during the discussion. And now let's meet our panel, who's here to discuss collaboration technology in the evolution of business. First in the middle here is David Carr. David is the editor of Information Week's healthcare section, where he also routinely covers social media and social software. He's the author of Social Collaboration for Dummies, which just came out at the end of October. And if you should happen to read the book, we hope that you will be sure to stop by Amazon.com and add to the glowing reviews that are there.
5-star.
There you go. Next is Sue Bergamo. Sue is the former Chief Information Officer at Net Atlantic, and prior to joining Net Atlantic, she worked in similar capacities for some well-known companies, including BTE Consulting, Aramarks, Galls and WareGuard Units, and Staples. She is a member of the CIO Executive Council and has previously contributed for CIO Update and Mass High Tech. Reid Nuttall is the international background from living and working in Asia and Europe with large companies in the energy sector and utilities. He has been a leader in implementation of smart grid tech and has been designated as a CIO of the Year by Energy Biz magazine. He's now working with some small entrepreneurial tech-oriented companies, which he's passionate about using analytics and visionary insights to achieve significant improvements for them. And next to me here is Tom O'Keefe, having spent much of the previous decade founding several internet startups. Depending on how one wants to think of it, Tom O'Keefe founded or became the persona known as Boston Tweet, starting back in 2008 and trying to help small businesses generate buzz and awareness in a down economy. Fast forward to 100,000 Twitter followers later, Tom continues to work with small businesses as he's partnered in the past with the likes of Groupon, PayPal, PingUp, and now CoEverywhere. I can assure you firsthand there is not a restaurant or bar in the city where Tom can hide. So
it is true.
Sorry
for screwing up your order here, Chad.
No, hey, we got everything. Perfect. So in trying to get our heads around the idea of collaboration, first I think would be, what does collaboration mean to business? If there's any of you who want to sort of kick that one off.
I'll start. I think collaboration is what business is all about. Since a few centuries ago, when we moved away from the tradesman who did everything himself and started using multiple inputs to accomplish something, there's always been attempts at collaboration. And those attempts you see in various ways. You start seeing as they organize people to get the work done. Then they find out they need to collaborate between people, so there's an organized workflow. Then you go from the workflow and you say, oh, but we're still in our silos, so we have meetings, heaven forbid. And then you have multiple purpose teams. Then you go over from beyond that. You say that's not working. So then we brought in and we had focus groups, we had polls, we have surveys. So business has always been striving to find a way to collaborate. Now we're at this new era where we have some new tools, and the business leaders who have been raised on the old tools have difficulty understanding them. But for business, collaboration using multiple inputs from different people to drive an output has been critical through history.
I'd like to go next. I think that this is one of the areas that's just sort of a misnomer as to really what is collaboration. And I think that the definition is it depends. So to me, being in a corporate setting, it's data and information flowing, but it's also communication. And I don't think that a lot of companies really understand how actually to collaborate. There are tools that you can collaborate with. There are, different forums that you can share information. But then, what do you do with all that information and data and communication once you have it? How do you utilize it in order to take your business to the next level? And I think this is where there's a huge gap.
Collaboration is really just getting work done together, getting work done in a team. It can be online, it can be in a conference room. Now, the subject of my book is about how social networking technologies and social media are coming together with collaboration. Obviously, that's a trend that I'm very interested in, but there really are two slightly different things. They can be complementary to each other. The social networking is more about how you connect with other people. So the connections between people and content they have created or interacted with. So it's really the network of those connections that is the social network. The software or the website is just what kind of makes it visible and able to be manipulated. And the social network gives you a way of letting other people know about what you're doing. Usually, collaboration is usually a little bit more of an intense activity where we're getting together and we're working on a specific project. So there's sort of a handoff between those two things.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been involved. I use social media to collaborate with local businesses, and I'm fortunate. A lot of my collaboration is one-on-one in person, and then we use tools like Google Docs or anything when I'm remotely there. But it's evolved over time from, the email was probably the first tool to collaborate 10, 15 years ago online. Telephone was a collaboration tool when it started. Before that, it was probably the written letter. So it's just with technology, it just really helps people work together. And as Reid was saying, locally, years ago, it was just who lived around you. And now because of all these tools, we can branch out to Asia, Australia, all over the world and collaborate like they were in your next room.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of collaboration platforms, how has that been changing the employee landscape? What are the key players and key people that need to be involved in order for an organization to figure out what's the best tools and setups for it?
Yeah, I think it's changed quite a bit. It's interesting. We talk about tools, the culture matters as much as the tool, which is a different issue. But as you go in and you start using a tool, you're going to see that some people will go and start using the tool and some don't. Therefore, you have imperfect collaboration. You're not getting the benefit you can have. When you look at a company, is interesting is if you have some visionaries who try to introduce a tool, you have others that often go and shut it down. The reason for that could be for multiple purposes. One is because of culture and your belief. Senior management quite often tends to be older and not as experienced as some tools. Second is in putting a tool, I was a CIO coming through, I quite often would get software and I'd have to have an ROI on the software. Mm-hmm. How do you put your ROI on collaboration? There's ways to do it and think it through, but it's very soft in how you do it. Third is you really have to think in a company, you need to have rules because a company is worried about privacy and security along with everything else. So you need to have your legal counsel involved in such a point that they want to have it happen. Legal counsel can shut it down if they don't make the rules. And you need to have your policies, your HR department, and your policies such that people don't get killed for collaborating and saying the wrong thing. Right. And then you need the management culture. You need some visionaries to push it. And then what I found is that there's pockets of great people in different organizations that can do it. I have yet to find it where we've been able to get it universal throughout a company using any one of the tools that we've tried to use.
You mentioned the notion that it's not the tool, it's how you use it. And that's certainly very much true. Different organizations get vastly different results with the same tool. But I do think the tool selection is very important. It sort of sets the floor and the ceiling. You can limit yourself by selecting a tool that's inappropriate for your organization, and not get as good of a baseline. But sort of between those two extremes, it makes a lot of difference whether you have things like community managers who are actively looking at the flow of collaboration and spotting problems. At least we're talking in general terms. These tools are some of these tools are pretty different, but anything that has document repositories or wikis or anything like that associated with it, eventually you're going to have outdated content. And I've had the experience of my organization does have a Jive enterprise social network. I've had the experience of trying to find the vacation schedule and finding the one from 2 years ago, that kind of came up first in search. And they're doing better. But these things are they're certainly not perfect.
And there are external and internal tools that can be used. I think one of the things that organizations need to do is have some sort of avenue. I don't want to call it R&D because I think that's too stuffy, but at least an opportunity to look at brand new tools that are coming into the midst. And there's always something every day. Not to bring technology into it, but BYOD policies. I mean, everybody wants to bring their own device, which is great. As CIO, you absolutely have to enable business people to utilize technology to do whatever it is they're doing. But that means they also want to bring their own applications. I think Reid said it very nicely. There's security concerns, there's how to message and how to respond to messages, especially from the external social tools. And somehow you can't just have standards, but somehow you need to keep some sort of standard in place from a technology perspective as you're rolling out these tools.
And the problem is for the CIO, the easiest thing to do is shut it down.
And that's not the answer.
It's a very poor answer.
Yeah.
When you have to address these concerns, you can't ignore them, but that doesn't mean you would say it's too difficult and you turn it away.
Right, and that's what I mean by trying things and figuring out with the business people what works, what doesn't work, what's the next greatest thing.
Or if you're going to, there may be some things that you do need to shut down, but you need to be providing some alternative that is competitive. So you didn't want Dropbox, maybe you set them up on Box if you think that is that much better.
Yeah, that's a very important point. It goes along with your accurate statement that the technology does matter. I've had some technology mistakes when I've started a platform and we find out that it's not very easy to use, and then you have to upgrade it and kill everyone's work. There's some real concerns there.
Tom, what about you?
I totally come from a different angle here. I'm kind of a one-person operation, so it's a lot of, to be honest, a lot of this is the large corporation collaboration is new to me. So I usually deal with a little more of the stripped down presentation, clear slide or slide point things, or Google Docs, as opposed to just communicating with 3 or 4 people. So it's a lot easier to manage. It's very effective. It's very effective for me as someone who works from home, but works with startups only a couple miles away, but us be able to kind of share ideas and share documents back and forth. But it's go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were talking earlier about getting to know other people through Twitter.
Yep.
Large organizations, and this is sort of the social networking part as opposed to the small group collaboration. But the social networking aspect in large organizations is getting to know people who are in the company, but they're on the other side of the world. And you get to know them a little bit. Or just they're on the other side of the building, but when you run into each other in the hall, you recognize each other because you have been discussing best practices about how to do whatever it is your business does, doing that online. And just having people's photos in there and having a link back to your profile where you can find out more about them, find their phone number, find their email, find other content that they've created. That's actually a big deal, particularly in large organizations, but even in small to mid-sized ones.
But it starts a communication before you even get to meet them. And it's sort of my organization, sort of like the city of Boston, and I communicate with a lot of, the amazing thing about, Twitter is ultimately probably more of a connecting tool, but ultimately it does lead to collaborations, and it allows you to get out there as a CIO. You can start a conversation with you and say, I'm really interested in this or that, and we know each other. It breaks the boundaries. Before that, there's no way I could get into your office. You would kick me out, call the cops. It's just, it allows you to communicate, and that's what I do as a collaborative tool with Boston. To form that communication, you're probably referring to a more internal, like a Yammer tool, which is a sort of a Twitter-esque product inside a corporation, but it breaks down those barriers. You're familiar to someone, see them on the street, say hello, and then that leads to partnerships, collaborations, and then using various tools. So I do with them.
In terms of when you guys are dealing with, going back to something you had mentioned in your previous answer about it's tough to really give people this tangible sense of results. A lot of these things are soft and tougher to measure and manage. So in terms of like social strategies and benchmarking things and being able to show people results, what are some of the strategies you guys have employed, and how do you think about what's a good way to sort of quantify something for people?
I think that's an easy one for me, working in the e-marketing space. All of that data that we get from our external social media sites, we download and then we put together effective marketing campaigns. So the analytics are easy to run and the metrics are easy to run as to you know, the importance of that data and how effective it is in utilizing it for, you know, customer segmentation, demographics, you know, whatever email campaign we're going to send out. So I think it's easy to do if you do it right and collect it correctly.
Right.
I mean, I always think it's a little bit tricky to try and ascribe ROI to the social tool you put in. You actually want to give credit to the people who are using the tool in a smart way. It's not the software that accomplished the collaboration. It's the people. Obviously, you want the software to get a little bit of credit for greasing the skids and helping them organize things. But people first.
Yeah, I think for internal use it's very hard to find the ROI. However, it's one of the most critical things management can do. You know, you see repeatedly the discussion that culture kills strategy if you're looking at the results of an organization. I believe that the collaborative environment for a large company is the key to the culture that can have success. So therefore, you know, as a CIO, I always try to sell anything on an ROI, but truthfully, there's some things that you do for strategic purposes, and culture is one of them. And that's why, for the marketing purposes, there's a lot of things you can do to measure it. You know, we've always spent a lot of money on surveys, polls, focus groups, or whatever. And this is another way, much greater tools now than we ever had. But the concept of collaboration is strategic, I believe.
Another place that I see this used frequently is organizations that have grown through a series of acquisitions, and so they need something to bring that organization together. And that's true of the publisher of Information Week. UBM is a conglomerate of a number of companies, event organization companies, conferences, and publishing companies. And our community manager reports up through the people and culture division. It was really driven by the CEO saying, we don't have a corporate culture. We have 20 corporate cultures, and we need something a little bit more unified. And it's not the only way to bring that about, but it is one of the tools that we've used to try and act more like one company.
Tom?
I don't think I'm too much extra to add.
Fair enough. Maybe in terms of what do you guys feel are some of the shortcomings or surprises, the things where you're like, this is a real need here that's still unfulfilled in what you've seen with social collaboration, stuff that's out there now?
Well, I think the need is around the fact that there's so many tools out there and there's always new tools coming. So it goes back really to the previous question of what do we need? You know, how do we use it? How do we best utilize it? What makes sense? I don't think that, as CIOs, personally, I don't think that I should stop people from using technology if it's their own or something that the company has. But if everybody's doing something different or using a different tool, then how do you bring all that information together? Because ultimately, it's really about the bottom line of the company and helping the business grow. So if we're all on a different tool set, I think we've sort of missed the boat. And I think that collectively we need to figure out how to gather that data and utilize it to the best of our interests. So I think that's really the gap.
I think there's a history portion there too, in that the knowledge management systems tend to have horrible collaboration tools. Yet you want to keep a history of what knowledge you've gained from the collaboration. I don't think there's a great tie there. And when you search back in some of the tools, in collaboration, you get a lot of you can't separate the fluff from the meat and find where the meat is. The search isn't there. The taxonomy of how you keep information isn't good yet. I think that there needs to be some progression there. There might be that I don't know about actually, but that's wouldn't surprise me.
To some extent, the social technologies have come along as an alternative to knowledge management. In other words, it's like saying people aren't spending the time to organize the taxonomy anyway or classify things properly, so we're going to let them do it in a more informal way. You know, instead of using formal taxonomy, we'll use hashtags. And you know, it's an imperfect way, but it is the opportunity for analytics providers to then come along and sort of make order out of all this mass of interaction. So
yeah, it's both order and seeing what matters. So like I love on Amazon, when on the reviews, you can see if that review is rated high by others or not. You don't have to read all 1,000 reviews. You can read the 20 that matter.
Well, and the social vendors are social collaboration vendors are definitely trying to do that. They're trying to give you that. You interacted with this document, you probably like that document. You're part of this project. You might want to keep tabs on that project that's related.
So just to throw a little different path on this, we really think about collaboration tools. I think a lot of people think about them as more social, you know, more web-based. But there are internal-facing tools that I also consider collaboration. Believe it or not, ERP, CRM, you know, something as easy as document repository and SharePoint. Those are all collaboration tools that companies use, albeit at the bigger companies, but we are really and truly trying to store information in some sort of orderly fashion and then find it as quickly as possible so that we can use it. So if I take CRM, for instance, you know, there's, you know, big software companies out there that run in the cloud or run on premise. We all know who they are. But you know, if your Salesforce or your you know, your business development people aren't utilizing the tool in the same fashion, then you know, maybe the process is got holes in it, but ultimately the data isn't really where it needs to be in order to help that company. So I always go back to what's the bottom line? How do you help the company grow? And how do you do that? You do it by having good data. And so I don't want to discount some of these back office applications that I really do believe are also collaboration tools. And I'll throw that out for you guys to
So question, so how do you have good data?
That's a great question, because everybody has a different version of what's good data. There are, I do think that there are some key, I'm going to say key fields that need to be included in any sales call. You know, customer number, customer account, you know, people who you can contact, phone number, things like that. There has to be some set of basic data that has to be created, but then the rest of it could be a little bit more free-form. And then I think companies just have to set guidelines as to what they're looking for their reps to do.
Right. But I mean, the comparison with structured data isn't necessarily entirely either or. I mean, if you look at where Salesforce.com's chatter came from,
Exactly.
It's the structured record, but you go down to the bottom of the customer record and you have the opportunity to start a discussion about it. And other people who aren't necessarily looking at that record will see things because they decided to follow it, or they decided to follow you as a person that they interact with, can keep tabs on things in the background. And you can have links between the structured data and the more unstructured interaction as well.
See, so what I think is important is for people to want to make those links. So it comes back to their cultural thing, and we go back to what Tom's saying. You know, it's when people want to, instead of keep the information to myself, and you know, made this phone call, they tell me I have to do these required fields, press a button, and go on to the next. The key is to say, oh, by adding richness to this conversation, that could help me or someone else, and I'll get helped by someone else. That's where good data comes, both inside a big corporation and also as you work with your friends. You know, as I listen to you describe a group of people who actually became a group of friends, where you're actually collaborating because you may not gain something here, but you'll gain something there. It's a different culture.
I mean, my most important thing is to make that initial connection, and then from there, I'm always looking for a new contact, and I do some sales too.
Yeah.
But that's, for me, the data that's most important to collaboration tools are, you know, who do I meet next? I meet Chad, but then who does Chad recommend be on there, and who can help me? And a lot of that, to be honest, is offline stuff too. But it starts, I think a lot of it starts online.
Yeah. Still making sure you have that human element in helping people navigate that information. It sounds like being able to give it a narrative thread through the different types of touch points and documents and things that are kind of out there seems to still be a pretty big problem for people. In terms of getting people to adopt technology faster, what are some of the tips or focus points that you've had in looking at, if we could get people to really accelerate their use of these tools and these products that are available to them, what are some of the things that you've encountered for resistance points or trying to get people to adopt one thing over another, so to speak?
It's completely on the age group as far as I'm concerned. I hate to say it, but
Yeah, I think everyone I pretty much work with adopt it the second it comes out.
Yeah.
Some age, but some also fields I think are different. A lot of, I'm tech and marketing. I think are earlier adopters as opposed to maybe finance, insurance, accounting, some of those industries.
And also, I think the other part of adoption is their understanding of the need for the tool. So, you mentioned finance. They're in spreadsheets all day long. They don't really want to do social networking or social collaboration. So I think if you can give them some sort of benefit as to why they should embrace it, they'll come. But it may be a little slower than, say, the marketing team or the sales team.
Well, one of the traps to some of these social collaboration tools has been the idea that people will find it familiar. I mean, Yammer particularly does look a lot like Facebook. It's Facebook with spreadsheets instead of cat photos. But still, you really can't assume that everybody in your organization is even an active Facebook user. There are, and it's not even by age. There are people who messed with it, and it never appealed to them. And even if they do recognize what to do with it, how to use it, they don't necessarily know how to use it at work. And so everybody needs a little bit of coaching about that. What is the point of bringing this into the work environment? What are we trying to accomplish with it? And we don't just want you planning the pizza party for Friday. We want you actually planning the new product release.
Yeah, but if you want to see collaboration happen, you need to be the example and be using it yourself and talk about it. This is cultural. And where I've seen it succeed is where in a larger company where management wants it to succeed. And you'll see it not succeed in areas where management doesn't care about it. And then you'll see some more success if there's a 20-something that takes it on and is the super user in a group and gets praised because of it. You see lack of success. I had an IT department that I think was 70% introverts. And it was really tough dealing with them.
That's low, actually.
And it's also a number I pulled out of the corner, so I'm probably wrong too. When you say that number, people believe it for some reason.
Right. Best statistics are the ones you make up on the spot.
Yeah, I know. We're working on camera, so I didn't have time to research. Not that I could. But anyways, it's interesting. This goes back a few years. Okay, so for people to work from home, that's great, but I'm missing the collaboration. So I make a rule that if you work from home, you have to have IM. So at least you're on, you can always, and you have to answer IM. Otherwise, you're not working. It was an interesting rule because it caused a discussion about what the value of the water cooler was. And the fact that having someone come into my cubicle or office isn't a bad deal, that we actually encourage that. That's not wasting time. So it's talking about the culture of the company when you're talking about that.
it's just virtual now, the water cooler, that's all.
Well, that's what we don't want to get rid of the water cooler.
Right.
We just have different tools for it.
That builds relationships and trust and
Yeah, because everything you've talked about is the same inside a big company or in real life. These connections matter. If I say the word social media, however, to the other people on the executive team, they turn me down. If I say collaboration, they say, yeah, we try to do that. We try to do teamwork. So, if they're old, you just use some different language.
Right.
But everyone wants to build the team and work together.
sure.
And that's what social media, along with collaboration, provides.
Yeah, I keep telling people, some of the vendors have gotten away from saying Facebook inside the enterprise because they think that makes it sound trivial. I said, well, maybe you should talk about LinkedIn because LinkedIn's kind of stuffy and boring and professional, and we can focus on that. But now they're ruining LinkedIn. They're making it less stuffy and boring and professional. So they're trying to get more interaction going and gamifying things. So It's all confused.
There's an area company, no names mentioned, but I actually saw a presentation by their CIO on what they had done for an internal collaboration. So when I say the word intranet, everybody goes, oh, just push data at me. It's static, it's boring, it's outdated. But what they did is they actually created their own Facebook-like site for their employees. And what they decided, yes, they have parts of this site that you can go out and get your your HR forms and all that boring, mundane stuff. But it literally, employees can post and collaborate on things that are happening during the day. And the CIO was telling the story of how they had to try to sell this concept, and at first, nobody really was too thrilled about it. But then once it took off and was implemented and people started trying it, the amount of communication that was happening amongst the company was so terrific that they now fund it, and they fund it every single year. And it's a terrific tool for internal employees to talk.
This is something that was homegrown?
It was homegrown, yeah.
It increased both online and offline communication?
It's mostly for internal communication.
Sure, but internally within the company?
Within the company, yeah. It has nothing to do with external customers.
No, I know, but it has increased real-world conversations
Absolutely.
internally, because you know a little bit more about them.
And it's a global company, so you have that virtual water cooler, and this is a great way to just bring everybody together on one site. So it really worked out well for them.
Now we're all intrigued.
I can't tell you who it is. I can tell you later, though.
Going back to the issue of introverts and trying to use these tools internally to, in essence, build that water cooler, do you think that those tools have really helped improve the way that people are communicating, in the sense of it gives them a barrier of, like, I wouldn't be comfortable enough to go up to you face to face right away, but I have this internal access point where I can sort of start to feel you out in that relationship?
Well, I think that works out pretty well for CIO level communication. You get a company all email, how many people are going to click reply and write back to the CEO personally? But the CEO posts a blog talking about company strategy and what he's wanting to accomplish, and there's a comment box at the bottom. It's very clear that he's asking for feedback, particularly if the last paragraph of the blog is, please give me your feedback. So it is a way of getting more interaction going, and part of the reason it's been successful, certainly as a corporate communication tool in our organization, is that our CEO globally was one of the first people who was active on the network. He was calling up the community manager like a weekend after it went live and getting instructions on how to use the tools. And our divisional CEO for UBM Tech is doing the same thing with some reorganization that we're trying to do now. He gives us progress reports probably, at least once a week, a couple of weeks, or once every other week. So it's pretty regular, and they get a lot of interaction going that way.
Nothing.
Fill the conversation?
I was wondering if Tom was going to have any thoughts on with some of the people that you work with in terms of smaller companies, guys who are off on their own, that penchant to be like, I am off on my own, I'm an introvert, I sort of do my own thing.
Yeah.
How have they been able to use that technology to sort of help bridge those gaps?
Well, I was mentioning earlier, I've worked on internet startups in the beginning of last decade, whatever it was called, and
the aughts.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
And I feel a lot of us were working remotely, working on products, and there was others that doing something similar that we could have collaborated and say, why am I wasting my time? We can join together and do this now as one, or share ideas. But there wasn't a lot of that, or at least I didn't experience, and I've had 2 or 3 startups in the early aughts. But I think with the rise of social media and collaboration tools, I am obviously a huge proponent of Twitter. I think Twitter on a whole has really brought that whole community, and I'm very focused on just Boston, obviously, but the Boston startup scene, the technology scene, has become so connected now, both online, thanks to Twitter and other various tools, but also in real life, personally, at various events that we meet each other at, and we talk of ideas, and able to hire a new developer or a coder. So it's been unbelievable. I think if you just look at, and the city of Boston had a lot to do with that too, and just really helping to build a great environment, in Cambridge, of course. But if you look at the collaboration, if you could somehow create the analytics for that from 2000 up to today, I think it would just skyrocket in the last 5 years, mainly because, in my mind, of Twitter and other tools like that.
Mm-hmm. So to go back to a point you had talked about in your previous answer about would you be replying to a company-wide CEO blast email? Probably not.
Yeah.
In terms of how email's been used and the encroachment, if you will, of social technologies into the email sphere, there was an example I remembered reading a while back from Atos, who's a French IT company with like 80,000 people, and their CEO said, "We are done with email. We're getting rid of it. It's phased out. Get used to it. It's gone." There are smaller companies who have these anecdotal blogs that track, here's what our week without email has been like, is this sort of attempt to purge people from the email, right? So do you feel that that these other social tools are really taking over for email? Is that a good thing or a bad thing in the way you've noticed it?
It is, I think, clearly a superior alternative to the reply to all email, where somebody sends a company all email or a group all email and people click. Something I saw in my organization fairly recently, and we have a social network, an internal social network, so this hasn't stopped it from happening, but somebody sent out that note saying, I'm leaving the company soon, it's been great working with you all, and so everybody replies to all back saying, oh, we're really going to miss you. And then in the middle of this, somebody's replying to everybody saying, stop replying to all, this is what the social network is for. Reply to all email is a bad experience. Long-running threads with, 10 deep quotations of what was previously in the conversation is a bad experience. So replacing that is something that is worth striving towards. I mean, email obviously has a good place as person-to-person communication. If we can limit it to one-to-one or maybe 1 to 2 or 3, then that's not so bad. And trying to do away with email in most organizations is probably a fool's errand. Mm-hmm. There are some interesting technologies to try and bring email and social collaboration together, or try and bring some of the social collaboration environment into your Outlook inbox. So Jive has a plugin that I use that allows me to see the social information about the people who've written to me if they're from within the company. And also I can take that conversation that started out in email and I can convert it into a discussion on our social network, which is Jive based, but we privately brand it as most of these organizations do. So I'm sharing it to the hub and say, let's carry this on in the hub, we can do it better over there. But trying to stomp out email is not going to happen anytime soon. And I think the company that you referenced, I think they actually bought a vendor or were developing their own product in the space, so they had kind of a selfish interest for blowing that particular horn.
So working in this space, I will tell you that I bet if we asked Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, and AOL if email would be replaced, they would say no. I mean, there are trillions of emails on an annual basis being sent through these ISPs. And I agree with what David just said. I think there's a way that you take these other tools and enhance the email experience, but I don't think email's ever going to go away.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. Email's here to stay. However, email has been abused, and an abusive culture is worse on email. And so many emails that I see are that cover your rear end, make sure everyone's copied, make sure nothing happens, and that is a management issue. That's a cultural issue with the company. And email is not the appropriate tool for that. There can be other repositories of knowledge. Email is used because people are so used to email, they use it, I just want to make sure this is documented. I want to make sure,
Right.
I've been at different places where we've tried different things, where you outlaw any email that is to more than one person, because email is an action device. There's different things you can try, but to try those, you need to examine what is the email being used for and have the other systems or capabilities there to replace what is being used for now.
And I'm not sure we necessarily articulated either, but social is a better way of putting out a message when you're not quite sure who to address that message to. So you're putting it out to the group, but you're not clogging everybody's email box. And you're going to get that picked up on by either people who are following you, if it's a general status post, to use the Facebook terminology, or you have groups established that are interest groups. People self-select because they have that common professional interest. So you have the accountants group and the business intelligence group. So you try and build up these communities of interest, share things in the appropriate way with the appropriate people, rather than trying to guess and just blast out email.
Yeah. If I can build on just a bit about your communities of interest, going back a few questions as we talk about the introverts, which was a subject I was very concerned about for quite some time. A lot of the introverts are afraid or don't use many of the in-house social network type issues, whether it be SharePoint or whatever, because they don't know who the audience is. So they're much easier for them. You know, go over, you talk about the letter from the CEO. Okay, right. So I had a blog on the CIO. I have some people that respond on it. I have other people that would come in and talk to me and say, I really like that. Well, why didn't you put it in writing? Yeah, I'm just not that type of person. You know, when we went over and we restricted it, so it was just in the IT department, they knew it was only going to be 250 people that saw it. It was restricted. I got a lot more responses than when it was visible for everyone, which is more of, I like things being open to the world. Sometimes that's not the right thing to do. Right. So there's something that we need to think of in the collaboration tools, in knowing who the audience is. Even on the social ones at home, I've seen my kids use a lot less Facebook and clean off their Facebook accounts because so many people see it and you get too much junk coming in. There's something about, it's not just privacy, about the target audience and opening it up if you know what your audience is, and as opposed to saying that, oh, this could be broadcast to anybody.
Well, I think too with some of the social collaboration tools, it's thoughts, it's, you know, it's small. It's just meant to be a small message. Where with email, and you know, email's meant to be more articulate, more lengthy. What I think part of the problem is with email is we don't send clear messages. We don't ask people for what we need in an email. We just sort of, you know, do a mind dump and then send it out to so many people. But if it's a clear message and people understand, should I be responding? Do I need to respond? What's really the outcome of this email? Is it documentation or is it something that needs to occur? I think from an overall communication perspective, we as individuals and employees could do a better job with minimizing email or saying things like, don't hit reply all.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I mean, you mentioned whether something needs to happen because of this communication. One of the important frontiers with a lot of these tools is building in more task management, project management functionality. Usually it's a little bit more informal than what you think of with working with Microsoft Project, where you're trying to plan things out and have the dependencies exactly calculated. It's more, you know, it's more coordination of things, but still being able to tag something as this is an action item and it is assigned to you. Being able to reach across the social network and find the people to assign things to is important, and having some tracking of whether those things actually got accomplished. And you know, that's, you know, you're doing it in the context of communication, but it's something that you really couldn't do too well with email.
Very good point.
In terms of being able to measure some of that, we actually have a question from someone out in the Twitterverse about why is it that organizations hardly measure the internal collaboration stuff, but when it comes to internet stuff and knowing the traffic and their internet visitors, all the emphasis is on measuring that really well, but not putting those same tools in place internally. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, I agree with that. I'm obsessed with the internet analytics and traffic and quantifying all those. I can't speak on the corporate side. It's a pretty interesting question to me. Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that there are some things that need to be measured, and there are some things you just should wing it. And I hate to say that because I'm all about metrics and I'm IT, and you know, I love my uptime results. But there are ways and there are things that we should be measuring, but they need to be very business-specific measurements. And honestly, sometimes you just have to try things and not be so bureaucratic about it.
Right. But the vendors are building in more analytics tools, tracking tools for the internal collaboration. You know, the numbers aren't as big as they are, and it's probably not as easy to do big statistical sampling to get at the trends. But that tracking is starting to happen. I mean, I agree in some sense that you have to look at broader things. Does the business seem to be accomplishing more now that we have some of these things going on? And if what you're trying to accomplish is some of that cultural change, are people actually working together better? Do we feel like we're achieving that shift or that cohesion that we were after? So some of those things are soft benefits. You're going to have to put up with the fact that there's some ambiguity in there.
In terms of, I guess, choosing, going back to some of the stuff you guys have talked about of just winging it or having this sort of just knowing that not everything needs to be in the cover your ass email, right? When do you guys put into place certain protocols or think about what systems need there to be? Is this an email? Is this a direct message? Is this a tweet? Is this a phone call? Is this a get up from your chair and go to an office, right? I mean, there's so many ways now to get that information across to people. It's overload of choice, I think, for a lot.
I think that's a true statement. I know with some of my younger staff members, I do say things to them like, it's okay to have a meeting, it's okay to pick up the phone, it's okay to have a face-to-face conversation. It doesn't always have to be texting. There are an overwhelming number of choices, and personally, it's preference of how you as an individual want to communicate, but I do think that companies, large or small, need to set the tone. Maybe it is culture. To say, you know, we do have to have some FaceTime. It can't all be electronic.
Well, I mean, honestly, this is one of the complaints about trying to add internal social collaboration is people say it's just another, you're giving me another
One more to
inbox
it,
I
yeah.
have to check. So, but I think a lot of us are in the mode where we've been adding those inboxes or those modes of communication for a while, and we're, you know, I'm sure you're bouncing around from Facebook to Twitter to
No,
Google
not really.
Docs
I mean,
or-
it becomes a headache, and I think you really have to sort of, at least in my case, okay, this is the way to get in touch with me. Tweet's the best way, DM, text message, email, and then call me.
Right.
Is the best way to get in touch with me. I'm pretty much
Yeah.
limited to that. And email, we were talking before, I think will always be around because it's something that everyone has. Even my mother has an email account, so it's something we can get
You
in
have
touch
to get in touch
everyone.
with your mom.
Yeah. So it's always it's just become so common that it's, you know, and it's still a great collaboration tool to send a quick document. It's very quick and efficient. So you know, I think it's here to stay. But how to connect with people has definitely evolved and sort of, and it depends on individuals.
Right.
I mean, if someone is best communicates via text message, maybe not work for a corporation, but then that's the way you communicate them with them online as you do offline. So if they prefer to communicate socially over sports, or you break down the barriers, they talk about a beer or talk about their favorite Red Sox player, you break that barriers and you communicate them on their own level. And I think technology is the same way, whether their own level is through a social collaboration panel or a text or an email or whatever it might be,
I
or a
will say
phone.
the social collaboration profile is a place where you can post that personal policy about the best way to reach me is X, or I'm going to be you know, the status message that says I'm going to be traveling for the next few days. You better call me if you really want to get me.
Yeah, but there's different purposes. One is to reach me. If there's going to be a discussion, a lot of discussions on email aren't worth it. I know, especially with the younger generation, I've been pleading with them to pick up the phone more often. Because I do not need to see a spat. That's not appropriate that is not appropriate in a collaboration tool. You know, let's talk face to face and solve it. If you have a long discussion, if you have a back and forth, sometimes a message, a meeting, or I hate meetings, we've had too many, because that's been our collaboration tool. But a phone call is great, and a phone call between two people, and then you've learned something else, and then you can have something going out on your collaboration tool or your email saying, hey, how about this idea? But when you get a lot of nonsensical sentences going back and forth, one-liners that don't add value, that means that you need to use a different means of communication.
I'm no psychologist. I'm a technologist. But I think there's another piece here that we haven't really explored, and I'm not saying that we should actually go down this path, but it's not just collaboration, it's connection. And, if I'd venture to say that we all want to see how many messages we're getting in our inbox every day, or how many followers we're getting, or LinkedIn messages, or Facebook posts. We want to know that people are out there finding us. I said before, I'm a brand. I want people to know who I am and follow me and message with me. It makes me feel connected with my network, which is very, very large, and it's worldwide. So I'm not saying that I'm needy and I need people to connect with me, but how many folks out there really and truly are using these tools because they just want to continue to enlarge their networks and make sure that they're known? And they have something to say. So maybe you have something to say on that.
Well, I
Tom.
think everything comes down to connections. I think ultimately, what tool it is, it ultimately gets down to connecting and doing business with someone one-on-one, in my opinion. So I prefer face-to-face as opposed to a phone, but I think you can really read the person more that way, and that's as basic as it gets, and non-tech.
Yeah, still the richest form of media is face to face.
Nothing beats it.
Right, nothing beats it. I think we can all agree on that. In terms of this space, long range, where do you guys see this technology? I know we've had a question come in from Twitter about the 5-year view, the 10-year view, the 20-year view, right? If you're really pushing this far out in terms of how does the social collaboration technology evolve? What are the things that you think are coming next in terms of the next big thing with it?
Okay.
Well, I just kind of tailing my last question. I have no idea. Technology will evolve, but it really will come down to connections. Ultimately, we always want to make connections. We have since the beginning of time, and we always will. So I don't think social media will go anywhere, any of that. It will evolve, but ultimately, we want to be connected. We want more friends, and we want those business connections.
Phone-based, holographic, with full smell capabilities. These things do change at a more rapid pace. I would hope to see maybe things integrated a little bit better so that we can have handoffs that are smoother between one mode and the next, between email and opening up a video chat or a text chat or whatever. But then some other technology is going to come along, and be off to the side of those things. So even if we get the things that we're all dealing with today, there'll be other channels, there'll be other complications. So it's going to keep getting more complicated. It'll get simpler, and then it'll get more complicated again. That's my prediction.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. So I'm going to think, decades ahead potentially, or maybe a decade, I don't know. But I think the application stack as we know it today has to change drastically. Yes, we all want to implement the 2-year ERP, but I think that vendors are going to have to be more innovative around how to bring some of these collaboration tools into that application stack, and how to integrate the data, and not just from an API call and you're transmitting data from one application to the other. How does the actual application stack utilize different technologies seamlessly, not in a batch program that's behind the scenes? So I'm going out on a limb and challenging the vendors. I think the future will be very interesting going forward.
Has been so far.
I think those are all great answers. I think in the collaboration is something that we struggled with for hundreds of years. I do think that we call this knowledge management and this collaboration and this a communication capability and this an application. I think that we're going to see things be unified together, not necessarily by the same vendor all the time, but being able making it so it's not so product or device specific as we go forward. And that's going to be very important when I can look at whatever interface I'm used to here in my watch or my Google Glass or whatever. And I remember that conversation that I had with Tom five months ago. What was that about? Oh, yeah. And I'll see the conversation or the email or the tweet or whatever it might have been, or the holographic display. Not the smell, though. We're not going to go back to the smell. I'm not sure I agree with that one. It'll probably happen though.
So everything recorded.
Yeah, or at least significant events recorded. But I think that there's going to be unification when you go back to it. Because I still think we never went through solving knowledge management. You know, and we've never gotten the taxonomy right, and that needs to be automatically collected somehow so that we can find what we need when we need it. Search is getting better every year.
Well, certainly some of the analysts have seen this in the context of social just being a stepping stone to contextual IT, where our systems know so much about us because of the way we've communicated, because the information we've recorded and who we've interacted with and where we've been, all our GPS coordinates. And so systems will bring us the information we need before we ask for it. I don't know whether that's true, but that's what the guys who get paid the big bucks say.
Do you feel, from an undercurrent of that statement, though, is there a fear that the adoption of these technologies is infringing on people's sense of privacy, or what's actually my thought versus something that's now sort of collectively out there for people to have? I mean, that seems like the next implication of that technology you're talking about.
I don't know. I'm talking about workplace collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, privacy.
Well, if I'm wearing
anyways.
Google
It's
Glass
supposed
in
to
the
be
office, and you
Yeah.
know everything
Oh,
about
okay.
what I've been studying in there,
Right.
to be able to get a better
And
sense
if you're
of.
wearing Google Glass into the men's room, and I don't know.
I think
there
there's
are hazards, I'm sure, but
I think this is an area that hasn't really been explored yet. As CIO, my job is around protecting information and making it available. So all the geotagging, and I need to have information about where I am, and it's a scary world. As a technologist, I love it. As a CIO, I take a pause every day because there are security concerns with getting data in the wrong hands. And look at the amount of companies that are being hacked into right now. They're going after things like email addresses, your websites, your databases. That's real information. That's company property. That's intellectual property, and we have to protect that. So I can't wait to see how the world will turn in this regard. But there's clearly concerns.
I'm hoping there's more awareness of privacy so that you know this Twitter goes to all my followings. This Twitter, I'm sending a tweet just to that person. That same concept needs to be in other social circles. That I think that concept is coming, but it's going to take a while. But that, when I talk to a lot of people that don't use social collaboration, is the fear of the fact that everyone's stealing all my data. When you understand the circle that you're communicating with, it's going to make a difference.
right. You have to have the mental model of what you think is going to happen with that information match how the software actually works. Have some confidence in that.
I guess continuing on with that sort of futurist look, and one last question from Twitter would be, is there an opportunity for someone to really pull together and unify all of these type of technologies and options? Is that something where you think there's a convergence that could happen towards many of these, or is this still very much a fractured field with a bunch of different case uses?
I would love to see it. I don't think it's possible.
Are we talking about the scenario where one department is on Chatter and one's on Jive, one's on Yammer?
Yeah, I mean, you
those
sort of have
sorts
that,
of things.
and knowing every phone call that's been recorded now gets Google Voice analyzed and being right. I mean, like there's opportunities for all of this data that's being put out there through people.
I was thinking the question was more not that everything's recorded, but that it's coordinated. So my
Right.
email knows what the phone calls were.
Exactly.
Knows what the
How do those all tie in?
tweets
So is
were.
there, where do those opportunities exist that you see it for the best
I
chance
mean,
of
in
unifying?
terms of where we are today, it's definitely true that every social collaboration system is its own island, and I guess there have been some integration scenarios where you can be monitoring activity in Chatter from Jive and back and forth, some of that, but compared with email at least has become a standard. And maybe some of us remember when you couldn't necessarily send an email to somebody at another organization, or you couldn't send an email from CompuServe to AOL.
No, I'm not that old.
Oh, I am. But social definitely is not a standard on that level, and it's not necessarily clear that it's going to become one.
I mean, there are products out there today that, you know, major vendors have from a collaboration standpoint that tie a lot of different technologies together. Microsoft is a terrific one out there right now. So you do record, you know, everything from voice to email to video conferencing right there on your desktop. So I don't see it as, you know, a stumbling block. I think there's going to be more of it in the future, and there has to be.
Mm-hmm. It's just more info to try to parse through
It's
and
just
make
more
sense of
info.
where it all needs to go.
But then again, you know, right from your desktop, you have access to all of that information. You can pull up a log file. You can go back and check. So it's pretty good, in all honesty.
Well, I think we're actually up against the clock for the hour that we had budgeted. So I do happen to see from some of the earlier Twitter chat that there was a feed problem, which I know got resolved later on. So I'm of the impression that this will be recorded and available for people to access later. But please feel free to continue the discussion at hashtag VDLPanel13. And again, I want to thank the panel for taking the time here, Reid, Sue, David, Tom, and for everyone at ViewDo and BrightStar for being able to put this on today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.